Escucha mi cantar, recuerda no olvidar, caminando a la claridad. Escucha mi cantar, recuerda no olvidar, caminando a la claridad. Nos habían hecho siempre el cuento al revés, nos mienten sin permiso. Y cómo atreverse a violar toda nuestra memoria, ansiosos por manipular, creando tratados llenos de ilegalidad. Despliegan su vajilla y su banquete colonial, desangrando a tu pueblo, secándolo hasta la raíz. No es verdad que todos nosotros somos pocos, no es verdad eso de que somos pequeñitos. La verdad es que nos exprimen poco a poco. Nuestra historia verdadera exige un grito. Hay que reestructurar, mira, no hay más que hablar. Somos la gente que deja huella. Hay que evolucionar, mira, no hay marcha atrás. Somos la gente que deja huella. Escúchame cantar, recuerda no olvidar, caminando a la claridad. Escucha mi cantar, recuerda no olvidar, caminando a la claridad. Tiempo pasando cual si no pasara nada, olvido es como un vicio. Y esos charlatanes jugando a Simón, dice con nosotros, despierta y date a respetar. Asumo conciencia de mi espiritualidad, sanándome a mí mismo, edificando bienestar, accionando a la tribu desde la fuerza del amor. No es verdad que todos nosotros somos pocos, no es verdad eso de que somos pequeñitos. La verdad es que nos exprimen poco a poco.
Oh, wow, that got really quiet really quickly. Welcome, everyone, if you want to come grab a seat. So as you're grabbing a seat, you'll see that there's pieces of paper throughout. There's enough for you to share with the person next to you. We're going to do some collective reading today. If you're lucky enough to be in a row on your own, you might have your own. Otherwise, feel free to, maybe not snuggle up, ask for consent first before you get close, but if you want, also in the back there's a QR code where you can scan with your phone and get the reading up on your phone. So either or, just take a second, make sure you have access to it. All right, good morning, y'all. So I'm Dr. Rodríguez. I am a professor here of history, at least that's what I'm told. And so what I want to invite us to do today, especially on this week, is to talk a little bit about the concept of freedom dreaming, and to do a little freedom dreaming. So what we're going to do today is that we're going to read something together, we're going to do something together, and then we're going to talk together. Sound good? 3 easy movements. So leftists throughout the 20th century, the Young Lords, the Black Panther Party, they often came together to do political education. So they would read Fanon or Marx with one another, they would wrestle with their ideas, and part of this practice often involved reading whole books together, literally sitting in a group together and reading, or reading selected excerpts, reading entire essays, and discussing how those ideas mapped on to the struggles of their day. So today, I want to invoke that tradition, especially today, and have us read through an excerpt an extended excerpt from historian and theorist Robin Kelley's book, Freedom Dreams, which is what you have in front of you. So often in radical spaces, we are fighting towards very discrete political ends, a nation that is free, a border that is more humane. But what Robin's scholarship invites us to wrestle with isn't an exploration of the best next political tactic or campaign. Rather, his text invites us to first imagine what a free world would look like. Put differently, Robin's work invites us to critically wrestle with the histories of people who imagined toward the other side of abolition and work their way backwards. Not toward a nation that is free, but toward a world without nations. Not toward a border that is more humane, but toward a world without borders. So I want to invite us to take a moment and sit with an extended excerpt from Robin's work. So again, if you're just joining us, there are excerpts in paper. Feel free to read along with someone, or there's a QR code that you can scan and follow along. So a reading from Robin Kelley's Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination. Please follow along with me. My mother has a tendency to dream out loud. I think it has something to do with her regular morning meditation. In the quiet darkness of her bedroom, her third eye opens onto a new world, a beautiful light-filled place as peaceful as her state of mind. She never had to utter a word to describe her inner peace. Like morning sunlight, it radiated out to everyone in her presence. Because my mother knows this, which is why for the past 2 decades she has taken the name Ananda, or bliss. Her other 2 eyes never let her forget where we lived. The cops, drug dealers, social workers, the rusty tap water, roaches and rodents, the urine-scented hallways and the piles of garbage were constant reminders that our world began and ended in a battered Harlem, Washington Heights tenement apartment on 157th in Amsterdam. Yet she would not allow us to live as victims. Instead, we were a family of caretakers who inherited this earth. We were expected to help any living creature in need, even if that meant giving up our last piece of bread. Strange, needy people always passed through our house, occasionally staying for long stretches of time. In fact, my mom once helped me bring home a New York City pigeon with a broken leg and a failed effort to nurse it back to health. We were expected to stand apart from the crowd and befriend the misfits, to embrace the kids who stuttered, smelled bad, and had holes in their clothes. My mother taught us that the marvelous was free. In the patterns of a stray bird feather, in a Hudson River sunset, in the view from our fire escape, in the stories she told us, in the way she sang Gershwin's Summertime, in a curbside rainbow created by the alchemy of motor oil and water from an open hydrant. She simply wanted us to live through our third eyes, to see life as possibility. She wanted us to imagine a world free of patriarchy, a world where gender and sexual relations could be reconstructed. She wanted us to see the poetic and prophetic in the richness of our daily lives. She wanted us to visualize a more expansive, fluid, cosmopolitan definition of blackness, to teach us that we are not merely inheritors of a culture, but its makers. So with her eyes wide open, my mother dreamed and dreamed some more, describing what life could be for us. She wasn't talking about a post-mortem world, some kind of heaven or afterlife, and she was not speaking of reincarnation, which she believes in, by the way. She dreamed of land, a spacious house, fresh air, organic food, and endless meadows without boundaries, free of evil and violence, free of toxins and environmental hazards, free of poverty, racism, and sexism, just free. She never talked about how we might create such a world, nor had she connected her vision to any political ideology, but she convinced my siblings and me that change is possible and that we didn't have to be stuck there forever. The idea that we could possibly go somewhere that exists only in our imaginations, that is, nowhere, is the classic definition of utopia. Call me utopian, but I inherited my mother's belief that the map to a new world is in the imagination, and what we see in our third eyes rather than the desolation that surrounds us. Now that I look back with hindsight, my writing and the kind of politics which I've drawn have more to do with imagining a different future than being pissed off about the present. Not that I haven't been angry, frustrated, or critical of misery created by race, gender, and class oppression past and present. That goes without saying. My point is that the dream of a new world, my mother's dream, was a catalyst for my own political engagement. I came to Black nationalism filled with idealistic dreams of a communal society free of all oppressions, a world where we owned the land and shared the wealth and white folks were out of sight and out of mind. It was what I imagined pre-colonial Africa to be. And sure, I was naive, still in my teens, but my imaginary portrait, derived from the writings of Cheikh Anta Diop, Chancellor Williams, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, and Kwame Ture, and others, gave me a sense of hope and possibility of what a post-colonial Africa could be. Now, very quickly, I learned that the old past wasn't as glorious, peaceful, or communal as I had thought, though I still believe that it was many times better than what we found when we got to the Americas. The stories from the former colonies dashed most of my expectations about what it would take to achieve real freedom. In college, like all other neophyte revolutionaries influenced by the events in Southern Africa, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, Cuba, and Grenada, I studied third world liberation movements and pre-emancipation societies in the hope of discovering different visions of freedom born out of the circumstances of struggle. I looked in vain for glimmers of a new society in the liberated zones of Portugal's African colonies during the wars of independence, in the brief moment when striking workers of Congo-Brazzaville momentarily seized state power and were poised to establish Africa's first workers' state. Now granted, all these movements crashed against the rocks, wrecked by various internal and external forces, but they left behind at least some kind of vision, however fragmented or incomplete, of what they wanted their world to look like. Like most of my comrades active in the early days of the Reagan era, I turned to Marxism for the same reasons I looked to the Third World. The misery of the proletariat, lumpen or otherwise, proved less interesting and less urgent than the promise of revolution. I was attracted to small c communism because in theory, it sought to harness technology to solve human needs, give us less work and more leisure, and free us all to create, invent, explore, love, relax, and enjoy life without want of the basic necessities of life. So my big sister Makani and I used to preach to others about the end of money, the withering away of poverty, property, and the state, and the destruction of material bases for racism and patriarchy. I fell in love with the young Marx of the German ideology of the Communist Manifesto, the visionary Marx who predicted the abolition of all exploitative institutions. There are very few contemporary political spaces where the energies of love and imagination are understood and respected as powerful social forces. The socialist, utopian, and scientific had little to say about this, so my search for an even more elaborate, complete dream of freedom forced me to take a more imaginative turn, which is where I discovered surrealism. Not so much in the writings and doing of André Breton and Louis Aragon or other leaders of the surrealist movement that emerged in Paris after World War I, but under my nose, so to speak, buried in the rich, black soil of Afro-diasporic culture. In it, I found a most miraculous weapon with no birth date, no expiration date, no trademark. I traced the marvelous from the ancient practices of maroon societies and shamanism back to the future, to the metropoles of Europe, to the blues people of North America, to the colonized and semi-colonized world that produced the likes of Amy and Suzanne Césaire and Wilfredo Lam. The surrealists not only taught me that any serious motion toward freedom must begin in the mind, but they also have given us some of the most imaginative, expansive, and playful dreams of a new world I have ever known. Contrary to popular belief, surrealism is not an aesthetic doctrine, but an international revolutionary movement concerned with the emancipation of thought. According to the Chicago Surrealist Group, surrealism is the exaltation of freedom, revolt, imagination, and love. Its basic aim is to lessen and eventually to completely resolve the contradiction between everyday life and our wildest dreams. By definition, subversive, Surrealist thought and action are intended not only to discredit and destroy the forces of repression, but also to emancipate desire and supply it with new poetic weapons. Beginning with the abolition of imaginative slavery, it advances the creation of a free society in which everyone will be a poet. A society in which everyone will be able to develop his or her or their potentialities fully and freely. See, the surrealists are talking about total transformation of society, not just granting aggrieved populations greater political and economic power. They're speaking of new social relationships, new ways of living and interacting, new attitudes towards work and leisure and community. In this respect, they share much with radical feminists, whose revolutionary vision extended into everyday aspects of social life. Radical feminists taught us that there is nothing natural or inevitable about gender roles, male dominance, the overrepresentation of men in positions of power, or the tendency of men to use violence as a means to resolve conflict. Radical feminists of color in particular reveal how race, gender, and class work in tandem to subordinate most of society while complicating easy notions of universal sisterhood or biological arguments that establish men as universal enemies. Like all the other movements that caught my attention, radical feminism, as well as the ideas emerging out of the lesbian and gay movements, proved attractive not simply for their critiques of patriarchy, but for their freedom dreams. The work of these movements, taken as a whole, interrogates what is normal, shows us how the state and official culture polices our behavior with regard to sexuality, gender roles, and social relationships, and encourages us to construct a politics rooted instead in desire. Black intellectuals associated with each of these movements not only imagined a different future, but in many instances their emancipatory vision proved more radical and inclusive than what their compatriots proposed. So in this text, you see Robin, one of the most important historians and cultural theorists of the last 40 years, inviting us into a framework for freedom dreaming, one that starts with his mama and goes back to maroon societies, weaves in surrealism and radical feminism and queer rights. At base, freedom dreaming is about imagining a world beyond the structures of our current order that cultivate freedom of expression, desire, and new ways of sociality, new ways of relating with one another. So what I invite you to do today, especially today, is to freedom dream. So what we're gonna do is that you're gonna find two other people, it doesn't have to be your friends. You're gonna grab some markers in the back, you're gonna grab a piece of easel paper that's sticky, and you're gonna put it somewhere in here. And with your group, I want you to freedom dream. And what that tangibly means is think about the world that could be. What would be included in that world? Is it clean water? Is it organic food? Is it corgis? Whatever the case may be, I want you to, with your group, draw what that world of freedom might look like. Does that make sense? So pick two people, go grab a piece of paper, grab some markers, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Adverso a esos que me quieren ver converso. Dicen que las letras de mis temas son muy fuertes. Para una masa que no escucha, solo baila, solo mueve, mueve. Quieren que siga aquel modelo. Mucha promoción, pero un sonido bien craquero. Pa' meterle el pie a la gasolina, todos son buenos. Pero pocos saben darle al freno. Que lo bueno es que hoy todos quieren ser primero. Pero en cada examen que doy se van con cero. Se alaban tanto que hay que ponerle un babero pa' que no manchen de babelego. Y ella se paró, este varón con
All right, so what I want to invite you to do is to, the music will keep playing lightly. Even if you're not done, that's okay, because we never stop dreaming. So what I want to invite you to do is to start walking around and to take a look at everyone else's poster boards. And as you're looking, make note of what is similar to or different from your own. And after you've seen all of them, you can return to your seats. Okay? So start walking around with your group. Take a look at what is similar to or different from your own poster board as you look at everyone else's, and when you get through all of them, return to your seats. Start walking around, take a look at the other posters. See what's similar to and different from your own.
ser tu gran amiga, incluso tu compañera de vida. Yo puedo ser tu gran aliada, la que aconseja y la que apaña. Yo puedo ser cualquiera de todas, depende de cómo tú me apodas. Pero no voy a ser la que obedece, porque mi cuerpo me pertenece. Yo decido de mi tiempo como quiero y donde quiero. Independiente yo nací, independiente decidí. Yo no camino detrás de ti, yo camino de la para aquí. Tú no me vas a humillar, tú no me vas a gritar, tú no me vas a someter, tú no me vas a golpear, tú no me vas a denigrar, tú no me vas a obligar, tú no me vas a silenciar, tú no me vas a callar. No sumisa ni obediente, mujer fuerte, insurgente, independiente y valiente, romper la cadena de lo indiferente, no pasiva ni oprimida, mujer linda que das vida, emancipada en autonomía, antipatriarca y alegría.
Take about one more minute if you're still looking. And if you're all set, you can return back to your seat. So, as you're making your way back to your seats, the music is paused, wonderful. So, I should have mentioned at the beginning that I asked for special dispensation to close at 12:40 instead of 12:30, so we're right on time. But if you do need to leave, you can, that's okay. But just to start bringing us to a close here, I just want to talk, and I'm going to invite you all on your own to think quietly for a moment, and then I'll invite 3 people to share. So what I want you to think quietly about is, think about your own role at this institution or in your community, whether it be as a staff member, a faculty member, a student leader, a student activist, whatever it is, right? And I want you to think about this question. How does the concept of freedom dreaming impact the way I lead in my community? Whatever your role is, how does the concept of freedom dreaming impact the way I might lead in my community? So take about 30 seconds on your own, and then I'll invite us to share.
Might be meaning the way we envision our role.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to invite 3 people to share, whoever it is. If you want to share, I'm going to invite you to raise your hand. Either I or Daniel Jose will give you a mic so that everyone can hear. Let's start 1, 2, and then we'll find a third.
I'll share.
Tell us your name while you're here.
Oh, sorry. Stephanie Krause, and I'm an MAR student. And I'm going to say what Okima said when we were talking. I see my role as one where I'm sharing the reality of my existence and my truth in a way that allows people to have conversations that talk about their own.
You can pass it to your right. Tell us your name.
My name is Nia Hayet, and I'm going to share something from what Dr. Rhodes was saying earlier. I'm an interreligious engagement concentrator, and in IE 102, Melissa asked her the question of why do you do this work? Like, what brings you to want to engage interreligiously? And she said it was partly out of not wanting people to, and to do theological work specifically, is not wanting people to tell her like why things are like the way they are, what things are, but to have the tools to participate in that conversation and to then shape the world around her. And I think that's a big reason like why I'm here and why I'm taking like systematic theology and like things like that, because I want to learn the nuts and bolts so that I can engage interreligiously and I can engage even within one religion in a way that can relate to what people currently know, and then also go a step further to bring them the transformation that we experience here.
Thank you. Is there one more person I would want to share, maybe from this side of the room?
So what came to me, Okima, what came to me was just boldness, like the ability to be bold, for better or worse. Just taking a step forward, being recognized, being known, and very similar to what Stephanie shared, that is something that does spread and gives people permission to do the same thing.
Thank you. So for me, I deeply see the notion of freedom dreaming, and I'll close with this, as connected to spirituality. So for me, when I think about spirituality, I think about multiple indigenous traditions and the ways that African diasporic religions have been creolized in places like the Caribbean that talk often about spirituality as a blurring of borders, right? So in the Spiritista tradition that my family partakes in, the borders between life and death are often blurred as a medium engages a seance. I think about indigenous traditions, various indigenous traditions, the Oglala Sioux, et cetera, who talk about the blurring of generations, where your work is intimately tied to the 3 generations that came before and the 3 that will come after, right? I think about the practices of Santeros who, when they are engaging in their initiation, a spirit mounts them, and the distance between that which cannot be seen and that which is often blurred in that trance, right? So I often think about spirituality as the blurring of borders between what is and what could be and what was. And about those moments, those assemblages, to use this word that's really been popularized by Jasbir Puar. In other words, these moments that just happen in a moment and might cease to exist afterwards, right? They're not continuous. Rather, there are these moments where that blurring occurs. It is in the seance that the blurring occurs. It's not all the time, right? And I think about freedom dreaming as an assemblage. It is an opportunity to bring about a moment in which the future that could be is projected upon the present that is. But to do that well, you also need to have an understanding of the past that was, that got us here, that continues to haunt us in such profound ways. So as you're leading in your spaces, what I want to invite you to is not a concept of activism, but a concept of spirituality, which I think Robin himself would also accept as a notion, right? That this is not just about creating a world through tactics and social movements, but it's actually about, to use the Spanish phrase, to thinking about the más allá, the beyond, and how that beyond collapses in the here and now. When we're dreaming about freedom, we're dreaming differently about what our present circumstances could be. And I think often about all the people who might not have had the privilege of being in these spaces but are constantly freedom dreaming, right? Like Robin's mama, who saw the potential for a more beautiful world in the rainbow created through motor oil and a fire hydrant that's blown up, right? So what I want to invite you to is, as you go on in your day, think about the moments where you can dream of freedom, not as an abstract reality, but rather as a potentiality, an assemblage, a moment in which the future that could be collapses with the present that is and builds off the past that was. Thank you all for being here together, and I hope you have a wonderful day.